I'm going to talk about the work that I'm doing to address two major problems that we're facing as humanity: the need for energy and the impact that our use of energy is having on the environment. Back in 2002-2003 time frame, the Nobel Prize laureate Richard Smalley did a study. He wanted to identify the top 10 problems that face humanity, and he ranked energy as number one. And he justified that by explaining that by solving the energy problem, you'd be able to solve all of the other problems on the list. So what about the energy problem? Well, the United States presently uses about close to 25% of the world's energy. About 1/4 of the energy produced in the world is used here. But we're only about 5% of the population. That may seem like the problem, but it's really not. It's an indication of the problem. The real problem, if you look at this list here, all of the developed countries use more energy than percentage of population. It's really a reflection of standard of living, quality of life. The challenge we have is that when you look at the top of the list up there, you'll see China and India. Those two countries represent together about 40% of the world's population, yet they're using less energy than their percentage population. That's where the challenge is. As those countries start to lift their populations out of poverty and continue their industrialization, they're going to start consuming more and more energy. And we're already seeing the price of gasoline rising, oil. There's going to be more competition for that energy. And of course, the impact that it has on the environment will continue to expand. Automobiles represent one of the areas of large consumption of energy, but also large consumption or large production, rather, of pollution, CO2 gases that are destroying our environment. In fact, there are about 80 million cars manufactured every year in the world. And as those countries start to evolve and continue to improve the quality of life of their citizens, those numbers are going to get even larger. To put it into perspective, clearly, as we use more gasoline, produce more CO2 to the environment, we're going to produce more pollution. Ideally, we would transition to a different kind of energy source, such as electric vehicles. To put that into perspective, 80 million cars produced every year. The battery for the Tesla Model S costs about $50,000. So you're talking about an economic impact of about $4 trillion in batteries every year. That's a mind-boggling impact. Clearly, we have to have a better battery technology if we're going to make electric vehicles possible. This picture reminds me of Carl Sagan back in the 80s in the original Cosmos series. The question was, I wonder when the dinosaurs looked up if they understood what was happening to them. We see the impact to the environment of our use of fossil fuels every day. We're constantly reminded of it. But we need to get our perspective on how we're going to proceed to address the problem so that we don't go the way of the dinosaur. Between 1970 and 1999, we spent about $7 trillion on oil. We literally have been exporting our wealth. Between 1970 and 1999, we actually had about 3 oil price spikes. Some of you might remember the 73 oil embargo. And each one of those price spikes was followed by economic recession. If you fast forward to since 2000, we actually went to war in Iraq over oil. And during that time, we had a price spike in oil. It was followed by a recession. That led to the housing collapse. And we're still in a tailspin in the process of recovering from that. So all of this over oil, clearly we have the ability to solve this problem. And military solutions are not necessarily the right solution, and clearly not the right solution because they're not a permanent solution. We can't deprive other citizens and other people of the world of resources that they need to prosper as well. And the military solution obviously does not address anything to do with the environment. We know how to address this problem. Back in the 60s, I remember as a kid watching President Kennedy in 1962 when he said we were going to put a man on the moon before the decade is out. He said we don't know how to do this yet. We don't have materials that we need. We don't have the experience of having done this, but we're going to do it anyway. And by 1969, we had man setting foot on the moon. What we need is determination to solve the problem. When I was a kid, I used to watch, some of you might remember these robots from Lost in Space and the other one from Robby the Robot. I used to watch these robots on TV. I wanted my own robot. So I decided to build myself a robot. It took me over a year to build him. Then after I got it completed, the problem I had was that nobody told me that the other robots that I was watching had people inside. But I didn't know any better than to try. Later on, this is one of my earlier patents. It's a technology or an invention that uses digital encoded scales that have been photographically reduced and a magnifying lens and a photosensor to read binary coded information from that scale. This is the base technology for CDs and DVDs. I got this patent back in 1979. I call it the big fish that got away. Well, I was having fun working on spacecraft. I was working on the Galileo project, which is presently in orbit around Jupiter. I have an invention on that spacecraft. I worked on Mars Observer, Voyager program, the Cassini mission to Saturn. So I was enjoying my day job. Eventually, I was working on a new type of heat pump. The idea here was to come up with a new type of engine or heat pump rather, that did not use Freon, because Freon's bad for the environment. I wanted to use water as a working fluid instead. As I was experimenting with this engine, or this heat pump, I built some nozzles and I shot a stream of water across the bathroom, and I thought, geez, this would make a neat water gun. So I put the heat pump aside. I figured that if I could I was having trouble getting people to finance and support this hard science stuff that I wanted to do, so I figured if I got some money from a toy, something anybody could appreciate, then I could have the money to go off and do my own products. And so I did. So that invention led to the water gun. Okay, this is the super soaker. That eventually led to super soakers like this. And I do have the first prototype here. Now, people know me for the super soaker, but what they don't know is that I'm responsible for the success of the Nerf dart gun line as well. I assume you're all familiar with Nerf. Some of you. You're not? So needless to say, I've been able to move forward with my hard science stuff, and I'm going to talk to you about some of that today. I'm working on a new type of engine and a new battery that will address the environmental problems that I was talking about. These, one of the things that have happened along the way, I was anointed by Time magazine as one of the top 10 inventors in the world. I'm sorry, about top inventors in the world. And my engine was actually identified as one of the top 10 world-changing innovations. So back to the problem. I felt I'm qualified to solve this problem, so I don't know any better, just like with the robot, I don't know any better than try. So I like this chart as an engineer. When you look at it, just it makes your eyes pop, but when you think about it, it's a really, really elegant chart. On the left side of the chart, it shows all of the energy sources coming into the United States. There's solar, there's hydro, wind, natural gas, coal, petroleum, and it shows where those energy sources go and what they're used for. There's power generation, industrial, transportation. The key here is that most of the petroleum goes into transportation. The bottom line is on the right side of the chart. About 37% of the energy available in these sources actually does useful things. About 58% of it is rejected as waste heat. Our ability to convert those energy sources into useful work is limited. So I came up with the idea of developing an engine that would be more efficient than existing engines. So if you could imagine an engine that would be more efficient than existing engines, would be able to convert heat directly into electricity. So if you had a solar system and be able to convert heat from the sun directly into electricity and do it more efficiently than any existing engine, we could and do it at a cost, which is a key element that is competitive with coal and natural gas, then we'd be able to eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels that are destroying our environment. So I set out to build this engine, and this is my engine. It's called a JTEC. It converts heat directly into electricity, and if you look at it, I like this chart too as an engineer, but I'm going to describe it. What's going on here, there are two membrane electrode assemblies similar to what's used in a fuel cell. And in a fuel cell, you have proton-conductive membranes, which is what you have here, but in a fuel cell, you also have oxygen and you have hydrogen reacting with oxygen to produce water. There's no oxygen and no water in this system. There's only hydrogen, and the hydrogen circulates in the engine continuously in a loop, and it's never used or consumed. I have two stacks. One is at low temperature and the other one at high temperature. And the low temperature stack is used to compress hydrogen, and you supply that compressed hydrogen to the high temperature stack where the hydrogen expands from high pressure back to low pressure. And you're supplying heat during that high temperature expansion. And what happens is you produce more energy during the high temperature expansion than it takes to keep the low temperature compression going, and you end up with net electricity coming out to a load. This engine operates on a cycle that is equivalent to what's called a Carnot cycle, which means that theoretically it's more efficient than any engine that's been built so far. And it has no moving mechanical parts. So, with that engine, we'd be able to use it to collect energy from the sun and produce electricity directly. And that electricity then, and produce it, by the way, more efficiently than solar cells, so that the cost of the electricity would be competitive with fossil fuels. And so what we need then, once we have the electricity, going back to the image and problem with the cars, once we have that electricity, we need a good battery to put it in. So I'm developing an advanced battery technology as well. This is a sample battery. This is one from my laboratory. This is an earlier version that we've been developing and working on. But the key to this technology is that it's an all-ceramic battery, meaning that it has glass electrolyte, metal materials, ceramics. There's no liquid to spill or leak out. And if you're familiar with batteries at all, you'll know that a number of battery fires have occurred. Those fires and problems have generally been associated with the liquid electrolyte, because when the battery starts getting hot, the liquid starts to build pressure and boil inside, eventually burst the can. If it's hot enough, flames evolve, and you have a pretty violent deterioration of the battery in its entirety. There have been battery explosions, the whole 9 yards. So for batteries, there are about 6 critical features. Performance, they're broken up into 2 categories, performance and utility. Performance, how much energy can you store? How fast can you get it out? How many times can you charge and recharge it? Well, my battery is all ceramic, it's solid state, and it holds about 3 times the energy of a lithium-ion battery. So it's a whole different category of performance. It's all ceramic, so it's safe. You don't have to worry about the fire issues. And the key thing that we've been focusing on, we have working batteries at this point, but what we're focusing on is reducing the manufacturing cost. I tell my daughter, I say, she asked me, Daddy, why are you working on batteries? I said, well, because we need batteries to store the energy from the sun and from the wind, because the wind is not blowing all the time and the sun's not shining all the time. She says, Dad, the sun does shine all the time. And the wind does blow all the time. It's just not blowing where Dad needs it. So we need a game-changing technology, and this is what we're talking about here. The lithium-ion polymer batteries are the state-of-the-art. That's the high performance. What this chart is showing here is that as you try to increase the size of your battery so that an electric vehicle will travel further distance, you start reaching diminishing returns because you're pushing around heavier and heavier batteries. What you need is a game changer, and that's what our technology represents. The Tesla touts a range of about 300 miles using a lithium-ion battery technology. With our battery, which stores about 3 times the energy of conventional batteries, we'd be able to drive that vehicle close to 1,000 miles on a single charge. That would change everything. we wouldn't worry about the price of gasoline anymore because we'd all be driving electric cars. So I'm developing both technologies for supplying green energy from the sun, as well as a way of making that use of that energy more practical, being able to store it till it's needed. The technologies that I'm developing will have impact across the board. The important point to remember here is that we do need renewable energy. We do need to transition away from the destructive use of fossil fuels. The technology that I'm developing will have utilities across the board. The batteries initially will be for cell phones, computers, things like that. They will evolve in size to electric vehicles and eventually for power storage for large utility plants. Similarly, the engine can be built, because it's all solid state, into very, very small device that will operate on body heat for powering personal electronics or even implantable medical devices, all the way to large systems for generating energy from the sun. So the bottom line is here. There's a large percentage of the world that is still in the dark. That represents a large portion of the human race, a human potential that has not yet been awakened. We need to address the need for energy throughout the world, else we're going to find ourselves competing over dwindling resources and continuing to destroy our environment. The transition to renewable energy sources, in my mind, represents one of the greatest challenges facing the human race, and I'm working on 2 technologies that I believe will help to contribute toward a solution. Thank you.